Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Curtis, and today I'm going to review BMF Season 4, Episode 3. The episode begins with Meech, Terry, and Loco in the back of a truck. It appears that the men driving the truck are trying to sneak them across the border. Terry is concerned because he feels like the men are going to turn him into the feds, but Meech tells him that Loco has already paid the guys off, so they will not do that. Next thing you know, we see that the men are stopped by a group of people who ask to search the truck for a possible fugitive. The men refuse, and then the group of men actually shoots and kills them before searching the truck. The group eventually finds them in the truck and forces them out. One of the men pulls out a piece of paper, and we see that Loco is on it, and he is wanted, and the group wants to turn him in for a reward. Loco decides at this point he wants to push one of the guys, and the next thing you know, it's just an all-out brawl. And we see that Meech and Loco, they are handling their business, while Terry, he's not. He's actually getting the business. And then Loco is able to shoot and kill two of the men. And then Meech and Loco, they're able to jump into a truck and take off. It takes Terry a minute to get, back to it, but he eventually jumps into the truck and he goes with them. Back in the present, we see Terry, who is upset because he just found out that Meech sends the product to Pusha in St. Louis. Markeisha storms in to ask him about the product. He tells her that it has been rerouted and basically that she needs to stall when it comes to Isaac and that he will find out what's going on. And Markeisha at this point pretty much reminds him of his position, and she gets closer to him and forces him basically to think of a plan. And then we go back to Georgia and we see Meech and Duffy talking about the product. Duffy's not feeling the fact that they moved the product to St. Louis, and it is at this time that we find out that Duffy, he did kill someone, which was already well known, but we found out that the person that he killed was actually someone who was getting ready to go to the NBA, and it's clear that this is something that is bothering him. After this, we see Nicole, who was on the phone with her boyfriend, and they're basically talking about the night that she got arrested and also the fact that she can't wait until orientation. And it's at this time that some girls walk up on her boyfriend and hand him a flyer, and he actually rushes her out the phone so he can talk to them. So I was like, well, I guess that's not going to last much longer. And then after this, Nicole goes downstairs and she notices that her mom has her bags packed. And she's like, what's going on? And then she finds out that her mom is actually going with her to Atlanta to visit the school. In the next scene, we see Vaughn on the phone with the detective who was questioning Nicole. Vaughn and the detective were discussing the car and revealed that they were only able to identify 2 of the 3 fingerprints inside the vehicle. The detective believes that it may belong to Meech or one of Meech's middlemen. Vaughn believes so as well, but the problem is Vaughn doesn't know the middleman's real name. So he asks the detective to find out that information while he reviews the video footage from the car dealership. Back with Meech, he's getting ready to fuck this lady from the last episode that gave him those pills, but he has to stop because someone is knocking on the door. And turns out that it's his mom, his brother, and his sister, and I was like, this is super awkward. Poor girl. She didn't know what to do. And Lucille, instead of just dragging it on, she got straight to the point, and she actually kicked her out. Lucille then tells him that he better have some church clothes because he needs Jesus in his life. And Nicole gets upset because you didn't go off on him the same way you went off on me. They get into an argument, they go in the next room, and this gives Terry enough time to confront Meech about sending the product to Pusha. Meech tells him that it was the best move at the time, and Meech also tells him that Vaughn is down there investigating them and also investigating the dealership. Meech, Terry, and Duffy meet with the woman from the dealership, and she tells him that one of her associates had a side hustle in which she sells stolen cars. She tells him that he has been fired and that was the only stolen vehicle inside her fleet of vehicles. So it's not like there are 2 or 3. That was the only one. She double-checked and she made sure. And she also tells him that as far as Vaughn, he did come back. He did have a warrant. He did take some paperwork and also took some camera footage. She's not really worried about the paperwork because it's going to lead to a dead end, but she is concerned about that footage. Duffy inquires about the person named Kenny, and she pulls out a folder, hands it to Meech, and we see that it is a picture of Kenny inside of it, and then she gets up and she leaves. Back at the house, Meech attempts to give his mom a fur coat, but she tells him that she does not want to accept it because she is a woman of the church, and she can't accept this knowing where it came from. He gets upset because he does not understand why she put so much faith into the church, especially when, you consider all the struggles and everything that they went through growing up. And Lucille pretty much tells him that, as far as God, he actually saved you when you got shot those 5 times, so you need to be grateful. And she says she's not going to accept the code. She rejects it. And then the next morning, Meech, Terry, Nicole, and Lucille, they go to church, and they see that the church actually has ATMs. And when I say those ATMs are filled to the brink, has a lot of money. So I feel like they showed that for a reason. They may try to do something with the church, I'm not sure, but they place a lot of emphasis on that part. Duffy and Kenny meet at Kenny's apartment. Duffy is trying to convince him to take the money and run, but Kenny doesn't want to do that. Kenny tells him that the only reason why he was selling stolen cars was to get enough money to pay for his EMT training, which apparently is over. And Duffy gets fed up and tells him that he needs to take the money and go. And he's getting ready to start going off on him, but he has to stop because Vaughn is actually knocking on the door. And Vaughn is trying to say, hey, just let me in. Let's do this the easy way. They're not responding. So he actually kicks down the door, goes in, and then we see that the window was open. So they clearly snuck out of the window. Back at the church, there was a scene in which, the pastor was preaching. People were like passing out. They were throwing money everywhere, like at a strip club. I don't think I need to elaborate on that scene, so I'm going to just move on. Next, Vaughn and a woman from the dealership, they meet at the police station. And they pretty much talk about, what's going on with Meech and also what's going on with Kenny. And she tells him that Meech provided proper documentation to get the vehicle. And then also she doesn't know as far as like the whereabouts of Kenny. And Vaughn tries to get more information. The lady says, look, I'm not going to answer any more questions. I know you do not have anything on me because if you did, I'll be in cuffs right now. And she puts her hands out. And he actually grabs her hands, slams her on the table, calls her a grimy bitch. And I was like, ooh. And then she can't take it anymore, so she just gets up and she walks out. Charles goes to visit Mickey and his child's mother. And at this time, Mickey talks to him about the trials and tribulations of raising his daughter. He also says, she has another surgery coming up. And while they are talking, Charles looks around and notices that there are a lot of pictures of them in the house. And Mickey's, the child's mother says that, they try to capture as many moments as they can just in case she passes away. And I thought that was really sad. But Mickey and his girls tell Charles that they're going to cook for him, right? And then later that night, Charles and Mickey, they're talking again about the trials and tribulations. And Charles notices that there are some things inside that are broken, that are damaged. And he asks Mickey, do you plan to get this fixed? And he says, unfortunately, he can't right now. He doesn't have the money. He has to pay for the surgery. And Charles says, you know what, that's okay. I'll bring my tools next time and we'll get this fixed together. I thought that was cool. Meech and Terry, they go to Purdy's video shoot where they officially meet Trail. Purdy tells Trail that, Meech actually helped him get the cards for the video. Trail, he doesn't give a fuck. And he tells him that, once you finish talking to your fan club, come over to me because I need to talk to you. And then they get into like a small little back and forth. But like I said, Trail, he doesn't care. And then the three of them, as far as with Terry, Meech, and Purdy, they continue to talk. And then Purdy reveals that everything that she has on is pretty much rented. But she doesn't mind it because she knows she has to take the proper steps in order to get to where she needs to go. And then she walks away from them. And then she pulls out something. I'm not sure if it was from the necklace, but she's able to pull out some cocaine, I believe. And she snorts it, and I was just like, dang. And then, later on after this, Meech and Terry, they're talking, and they decide, you know what, we need to start a record label. After this, we see Meech and Terry, they're talking, and then they hear somebody knocking on the door, and it's actually Jay Pusha. And Jay Pusha comes in and he says, you know what, I'm going to be honest with you all. Not only did I sell my portion of the product, but I also sold majority of your portion of the product. And he also says that he brought their cut as far as the money. And Terry is pissed. Terry wants to shoot him. Terry wants to kill him. But Meech is like, no, we can't really do that because you know what? We actually should be a little bit thankful because we wouldn't have been able to sell that product with Vaughn breathing down our neck. But then, after a while, he does say, you know what? Terry is right. You shouldn't have did that. But it doesn't necessarily escalate at this point. But I feel like he's definitely on notice as far as with Jay Pusha. And speaking of Vaughn, because like I said, he was, breathing down their neck. He does go to meet with Abe, and it's at this point that Abe reveals that he knows that Vaughn is the cop, right? After this, Markeisha comes by and she gets upset, and Terry tells her that she needs to stall once again when it comes to Isaac. She tells him that Isaac is not the person to play with and really shouldn't be doing this. But Terry tells her that, they really don't have no choice right now. And then he also says, what they can do is they can reblock the leftovers, and then he can get it to Isaac, right? But Markeisha's like, we can't do that because I promised him the best quality. But he's like, either he's going to get the subpar stuff or he's going to have to wait a little bit longer for the good stuff. And she's pretty much saying just make it as the highest quality as possible. After this, we see Loco. He comes to visit Meech, and he tells him that he needed to ship all of his products to St. Louis going forward because the feds are aware of their current operation. And this part, I was like, oh, I feel like this is going to come back to bite Meech. But Loco asks Meech if he can trust Pusha with his life. And he actually says, yes, I can trust him. It will not be a problem. Everything should be good. And I was like, oh, well, I don't know. Word is bond. That may not be a good idea, Meech. That's going to come back to bite you. Next, we see Terry and Markeisha. They're sitting in the car in front of the restaurant. Markeisha is super eager to get out of the car and go to the restaurant, but Terry's like, see, this is what I'm talking about. You are clearly not ready. You need to look at your surroundings, see what's going on to your left, to your right, north, south, figure it out. And so they start looking around and they start to notice that there are 3 people in there who do not look familiar. They actually look like they may be federal agents, and then they put 2 and 2 together and they realize that this is probably a sting, and so they actually speed off and drive away. And then they go back to Terry's place, and Terry confronts her, and she's like, look, I have no idea what's going on. I have nothing to do with this. I'm not really sure. And while they are getting into the conversation, Terry actually gets a call from Meech. And Meech tells him that they have to move the product to St. Louis going forward based on what Local says. Terry, he doesn't like it. He tries to say something, but Meech doesn't care and actually hangs up on him. And then Markeisha uses this time to say, you know what? This is what I'm talking about. He doesn't like you. He doesn't respect you. Once somebody shows you who they are, you got to just look at it and see it for what it is. And she says that he needs to surround himself with people who actually respect him. And then next thing you know, he's actually meeting with B. Mickey. And it looks like Mickey's back in the fold. So, hey, good for him. I mean, not really that great because he has a daughter to raise and we don't want him to get killed. But at the same time, this is a way for him to make money. So, hey, he got to do what he got to do. And that was the end of the episode. I really do appreciate you all watching. If you could, please like, comment, share, subscribe. I would really appreciate it. You have a great rest of your day. Bye.